So basically, I had a mentor one time explain it like this. It's like you have a bathtub, and phase one is, what is the water coming into the bath? So is it protective? Is it more carcinogenic? Is it more estrogenic? And then phase two detoxification is, how open is your drain to get that out? And then phase three is what happens in your poop. And so that's where something like a GI map test comes in, and we can see there's an enzyme called beta glucuronidase, and we can measure that in stool. And so we can see, are you actually, so beta glucuronidase is an enzyme. Think of it like you've got a package. So you've got estrogen that you need to move out of the system. It's excess, we need to move it out of the system. Beta glucuronidase comes in and snips that bow and opens that package up, and you reabsorb that into your body. And so again, this episode isn't about estrogen dominance, but if you've heard of estrogen dominance, and there's definitely some nuances there. And I think that label and term is actually misused in a lot of conversation, especially online. And that it's estrogen dominance doesn't necessarily mean you have too much estrogen. It means that you don't have enough progesterone to oppose that estrogen, and or that you're not getting rid of that through your drainage and your detox pathways. So this is where functional testing can be really, really helpful. And then anytime we are taking anything in, our liver has to process that. It is a huge processing center. And if you go back to previous episodes of the Transformation Show, I did a whole episode on the liver. You're gonna have to scroll back a ways, but you will find it on your favorite podcast platform, around how the liver is the most overworked and underpaid organ in the body. It is a chock full episode of really, really great stuff. And so, if you are someone who is, exposed to a lot of environmental toxins, so personal care products or cleaning products, that can put a burden on your liver. If you are still drinking a fair amount of alcohol, that can put a burden on your liver. And so if our liver is not functioning the way that it needs to help support these drainage pathways, that can also be a reason why these hormones are maybe not being utilized and excreted in the way that they could. And now I want to come into the conversation around blood sugar and inflammation, because this is huge. And having stable blood sugar that's like the first place to start. Before you invest money in functional testing, or all these different things that, I've talked about this before, like all the things you see on Instagram or whatever. If you don't have stable blood sugar, you have to start there. You have to start with sleep. You have to start with some of these foundational things. And so if you continue to overfast or use fasting as punishment, or almost like a quick fix to get a certain result, and likely if you're doing that, you're probably not getting that result anymore, because in my experience, especially with women in midlife, fasting works until it doesn't. Or if you're skipping meals, or if you're not balancing out your macronutrients, no amount of HRT is going to support your glucose and your insulin to support fat loss. It's just not. And that's where we start to bring in glucose, insulin, and cortisol and leptin when it comes to fat loss. And so this is where, for me, I was actually dealing with leptin sensitivity. Keeping to put more testosterone in the system was not going to support fat loss, because I was leptin resistant. And if you remember from previous conversations, leptin is that master hormone in the brain that is gauging energy storage. And so it's saying, okay, we have enough energy, we can let go of weight, or nope, we need to hold on and we need to conserve. And again, if you remember from previous conversations, cortisol is antagonistic to leptin. And so if that cortisol is high, and cortisol is that rescue hormone that if you're skipping meals, if you're over fasting, cortisol is going to be high, it's going to block leptin. And then we can become leptin resistant in the brain. No amount of hormone replacement therapy when it comes to estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone specifically are going to fix that. And this is where working with leptin and working with insulin specifically, because insulin is our fat storage hormone, right? It can tell the body, okay, store fat, or it can tell the body to burn fat. And so we need to really work with that. And this is where, peptides and GLP-1s can come into the conversation. And again, that's not what this is necessarily about. If you have questions on that, or maybe you've tried that and it actually hasn't worked for you. Again, these are very nuanced conversations. And this is where I really encourage you to reach out. Let's have a conversation versus just looking at social media, or, taking conversations versus an actual consultation that I would do with a client.